Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom, and today we're talking about the not-so-sweet truth behind sugar. Do you like sweet food? A lot of people do, but maybe you don't really like sweet food the way you thought you did. Maybe.
I only like sweet desserts. I've noticed here in Taiwan, a lot of people put sugar in the main dishes. Even the vegetables, which is a little weird to me. I find the soup here very sweet. I don't like sweet soup, and I hate sweet salad dressing, but I do like my sweet desserts.
Yes, and there's something also I've noticed that indeed here in Taiwan, it's very hard to get food that doesn't have sugar in it. If you order a drink at a restaurant and they give you tea, of course, it's always got sugar in it, and it's very difficult to have tea or other beverages without sugar in it. But at the same time, I've noticed that there aren't a lot of obese people here in Taiwan.
They don't eat as much as we do in America.
I guess not.
The size, the portions of the food that I see is much smaller.
That could have a lot to do with it, too, because every time I go back to my home state, I'm embarrassed. I'm so shocked at how many large land whales there are walking around everywhere.
It's shocking, isn't it?
You feel the ground shaking every time they take a step. It is ridiculous, and I'm so ashamed of my own country, and that's why I want to figure out exactly how they're doing it here in Taiwan to say so trim and so fit. But in any case, we'll talk about the not-so-sweet truth behind sugar in today's lesson. So let's talk some more about this subject now. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson, and we'll be right back.
The question of bias in food studies is not a new one. Lobbying groups have fought for and against various foods for years, and many food companies sponsor research that will paint their products in a good light. One example is Coca-Cola, which in 2015 was linked to a study that concluded that sugary sodas weren't a health concern if people lived an active lifestyle. Coca-Cola had contributed over $1 million to the nonprofit group that carried out the research, and it also administers the group's website. At the other end of the spectrum, another recent study claims to show that sugar does more than just contribute to heart disease. In the study, 43 children and teenagers replaced the sugar in their diet with other foods, mostly starches. Some children lost weight, while all of them showed lower levels of blood sugar and fats. Most importantly, there was less fat in the subjects' livers. Dr. Robert Lustig, the lead researcher, pointed to this as evidence that our bodies cannot process sugar-heavy diets without increasing our fat content. Not everyone is convinced of the validity of the study, however, and therein lies the biggest problem. Industry groups like the Sugar Association and companies like Coca-Cola fund studies not to present false facts, but to obscure the truth. While not all studies like these are intentionally manipulative, they create confusion and undermine public trust in nutrition science. Perhaps the best thing we can do is consume food in moderation, eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, and maintain an active lifestyle, all of which should lead to both a happy and a healthy life.
Okay, everybody, we're going to continue talking about sugar. Is it good or is it bad? And do people nowadays have a bias against sugar? Well, let's talk about the first paragraph here. Everybody follow along as we read this, or just listen without following along. That's fine too. But the question of bias in food studies is not a new one. Of course, we talk about a bias. That means people favor one side or the other. They're not objective. They have a conflict of interest, like we talked about those Harvard scientists being manipulated by the Sugar Association. So that's a bias. They wanted the research to show that sugar was good for you and other things were bad. So this question is not a new one. It's been going on for quite some time.
Oh, it sure has. We've got groups who are called lobbyists or lobbying groups. If you lobby somebody, you talk to someone about how you think they should feel or think about something. Lobbyists are primarily people who work in government. So they live in a city where your government is located, and they're constantly talking to legislators about how they should vote on a particular issue. So if you lobby somebody, you're trying to influence them to think the way you want them to think. So these lobbying groups have fought for and against various foods for years. Various just means just different types of foods. We've got a big range of foods, different from one another, all different kinds, all different sorts of foods. And many of these food companies sponsor research that will paint their products in a good light. Here's another light phrase. Remember in day one, we had a couple of phrases using light, like cast a shadow, and also shed light on. Here is seeing things in a good light or painting something in a good light. So you show its advantages and all its good things, not the bad things about it. If you sponsor something, you give them money for something to happen. During the Olympics, we have a lot of Olympic sponsors. These are companies that pay to have advertising shown at the Olympics, but they're actually helping the Olympics by paying for the Olympics to go forward, to happen, to be carried out. So if you sponsor someone, you are giving money to them so they can accomplish whatever it is you're sponsoring. Here it's research.
And sponsor here is being used as a verb, but it could also be a noun. Of course, lots of sponsors sponsor sports teams here in Taiwan. Of course, you've got the various baseball teams in Taiwan's local baseball league. They're all named after their sponsors, basically, and this is the case in Japan as well. So, again, they sponsor research. They pay for these studies that will paint their products in a good light. If you paint something in a good light, that just means you make it look good.
Yeah.
Okay, and one example is good old Coca-Cola, which in 2015 was linked to a study that concluded that sugary sodas weren't a health concern if people lived an active lifestyle. So, of course, Coca-Cola has sugar in it, quite a bit of it actually, and they probably knew they were already pretty guilty there. Yeah, we've got sugar in there. We'll admit that. But hey, here's a study that says that sugary sodas are not so bad if you have an active lifestyle. If you work out every day and maybe you walk, a couple of miles every day and you lift weights and stuff like that, then drinking a Coke or two every day shouldn't be a big deal.
Well, that kind of makes sense, but you'd be even healthier if you didn't drink the sugary soda, right?
True.
Yeah, so Coca-Cola had contributed or donated or given over $1 million to the nonprofit group that actually did the study or carried out the research. And it also administers the group's website. So it actually pays people to take care of that a nonprofit group's website. So they definitely had a bias. They weren't objective in this. They actually were doing a lot of work for that nonprofit group. So the nonprofit group probably wanted to produce a study that made Coca-Cola happy. See how that works? Yeah.
One hand washes the other. Yeah. And of course, they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. If they say something bad about Coca-Cola, Coke could say, well, we're not going to give you that money we promised you next month. Try to figure out that. So, yes, indeed, Coke does a lot of things for them. So, of course, you could probably see that this group is biased or has a bias. And at the other end of the spectrum, another recent study claims to show that sugar does more than just contribute to heart disease. So, we've got a spectrum here. Spectrum usually refers to all of the visible light that we can see, all of the colors, going from purple and indigo and blue to the other side, which is what? Yellow, red, orange, infrared, etc. That is the spectrum. So we're going to the other extreme now. One extreme is saying that oh, sugar's okay if you exercise. But then on the other extreme or the other end of the spectrum, another study says that, sugar does more than just do what we've thought. It actually contributes to heart disease. That does not sound good. To contribute to something means to add to something or to make it more likely.
I wanted to mention with spectrum, it often can just mean a wide range of things, and that's what it means here. But in the study, there were 43 children and teenagers. Those were the ones that they were conducting the study on. They replaced the sugar in their diets with other foods. If you replace something with something else, it means you take that original thing and you use something instead of that. So you might I'm replacing fish in my diet with pork. And that's an example.
Okay.
So they replaced the sugar in their diet. So they weren't eating so much sugar, but they were eating mostly starches. A starch is something that is found in the food you eat, particularly bread, potatoes, things like that. Lots of carbohydrates have starch in them. Cereals, potatoes, things like that.
Indeed, and starch can also convert to sugar, I understand. And some children lost weight while all of them showed lower levels of blood sugar and fats. So this particular study, this research shows that a reduction in sugar consumption can actually be good for you. And most importantly, there was less fat in the subjects' livers. That sounds good. I've had some scares with my liver.
Oh, really?
Every once in a while, the doctor says, I think there's a little bit too much sugar in your liver. You better do something about that. And, of course, liver cancer is pretty prevalent here in Taiwan as well as the U.S. So, yeah, you got to watch out for sugar and fat. Excuse me, I shouldn't say sugar. I should have said fat. I do have fat in my liver from time to time, so it is kind of scary. So, yes, indeed, if you have less fat in your liver, then you should be doing better. The subject here are the people being used in the study.
Yeah, the people, the kids, the children and teenagers are the subjects. Here we've got a Dr. Robert Lustig. He's the lead researcher, the doctor's in charge of the study. He pointed to this as evidence that our bodies cannot process sugar-heavy diets without increasing our fat content at the same time. If you process something, you go through a series of steps. Here we're talking about a series of chemical steps that happen in our bodies that change the food from, that food that we put in our mouths to the nutrition that our bodies can then use. And it turns it into different things like fat and sugar and starch, things like that. So our bodies, he says our bodies can't process sugar-heavy diets without at the same time increasing the fat content. Content here just means what is in something, what it's made of.
Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our lesson today. Let's take a break right now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenny. 今天我们要看的是第7单元，继续来看糖到底它的真相是什么，它跟我们健康有什么样的关系。我们前就说到了，原来呢之前早先1960年代的研究里面有造假的嫌疑，也许就是说他把应该告诉我们的事实没有讲明白。那当然这边就从食品研究里面他所谓的偏见其实根本也不是一个新的问题，因为呢他提到游说团体呢他们呢为了要拥护某一样的食物就会去做研究说它好，所以他说到 for and against， for and against， 当然 for 是表示拥护，那如果你是对抗它的话就是 against。 不过后面就提到了有一些公司他为了想办法让他的产品卖给消费者，他就会怎么样，要赞助那些研究，让他们从好的角度来描绘他们对产品的研究。这个地方他用到一个动词是 paint their products in a good light。 我们知道 paint 本来是跟画图，你做油画画画有关的一个动词，当然意思就是像 describe， 像 depict， 像你 portray， 你在描绘一个东西，说他们的产品 in a good light， 用好的角度来看 然后呢，大家就会相信他，然后进而买他们的食物。其中这个例子，他讲可口可乐就是这样。那我们来往下读，下面呢，他提到可口可乐的研究，他呢告诉大家哦，这个含糖的汽水不是健康上的疑虑，大家可以放心的喝。好，原因呢，当然是他做的这个研究来显示。好，再来往下读，下面这一段呢，就说到 At the other end of the spectrum， 这个片语我们可能比较少用，不过你知道 at the other end 就是在另外一端，而 spectrum 这个字原来是光谱，是幅度，是范围。那其实当你是说在这个整个光谱的另一端，意思就是相反的。跟它相反的是有另外一项研究，他说其实糖可真是会造成心脏疾病呢。注意到又用到了这个片语 contribute to， 当你捐东西捐钱，你捐给谁，你用的也是 contribute A to B， 可是 contribute to 摆在一起当作片语，它的意思呢是导致造成，所以有时候呢就相当于这个动词cause， 或者是另外一个片语比较常用的 lead to result in。 好，那这个研究里面是采用这些青少年他们的饮食里头，然后把所谓的糖的部分呢用淀粉来取代，然后结果发现他们体重都变轻了。不但变轻，最要紧的是他们这些人呢做实验的对象，他的血脂肪，他的血糖好像都变低了。那我们再来往下看，下面就说除了这个之外，其实他们说到其中有一位研究员这位医师呢，他还指出一点，他说我们的身体呢是没有办法说你不增加脂肪含量去处理重糖饮食，因为这个实验告诉我们，你如果喝了重糖，那你的脂肪就会跟着增加。好，这个地方有一个地方要注意的是 cannot without， 其实这个就是像数学的负得正，你无法怎样，如果没怎样无法怎样，换句话说，意思就是非得要把糖你处理掉的话，你的脂肪一定会增加。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, everybody. Let's say we continue with our lesson. We're talking about different studies. One was about Coke, and this study said, well, sugary Coca-Cola is okay if you have an active lifestyle. But at the other end of the spectrum, another study said that, hey, sugar can actually cause kids to have all these problems. If they reduce the sugar, they can lose weight and have lower levels of blood sugar, and there'll be less fat in their livers. So, indeed, you need to sort of decide which study you want to believe. Is sugar good for you, or is sugar bad for you? Not everyone is convinced of the validity of the study, however, the one we just talked about, where they reduced sugar in a diet. So everyone might think that, or at least most people might think, hey, this is a legitimate study. It's truthful, but not everyone is convinced of the validity of this study. Validity means how valid something is, whether or not it is acceptable, whether it's based on logic, or whether it's just a bunch of nonsense.
That's right. However, therein lies the biggest problem. We don't know who to believe. We don't know what to believe. So if you're not convinced that the study's valid, that it has some truth to it, therein lies the biggest problem. Therein is a really formal way to say in that respect. So it's here, you could say, this is where our biggest problem is. So therein lies the biggest problem. We don't know who to believe. Industry groups like the Sugar Association and companies like Coca-Cola, they fund studies not to present false facts. They're not trying to go out and just lie to us. But they are trying to kind of obscure the truth. If you obscure something, you hide it so people can't see what's really going on. Obscure. It can also mean that something's not well known. You could say, ooh, that's an obscure fact that you're quoting, which means not many people know about it. It's not, maybe it might not be important either. But here we're trying to say it's not that they want to lie to us. They just kind of want to hide the truth or make the truth hard to find. That's true too.
Yeah,
make it hard to find.
I think hide is probably the best word there for obscure, to hide the truth. And while not all studies like these are intentionally manipulative, they create confusion and undermine public trust in nutrition science. So, yes, indeed, they're not intentionally manipulative. Okay, not like that one study in the 60s where they tried to say that sugar was actually good for you and other things were bad. That was intentionally manipulative. If something is done intentionally, they do it on purpose. They mean to do it. It's not accidental.
No, they did it on purpose. So that's what we say commonly when we're just talking and just, being casual in conversation. I didn't do it on purpose. But instead of saying on purpose, you can use a little bigger word, intentionally. I didn't do it intentionally. So they want to create confusion. If you create confusion, you make things difficult to figure out. If there's a lot of confusion, it means a lot of things are happening at the same time. There might be even some panic, but there's chaos. There's a lot of disorder. Everything's kind of jumbled up. If you undermine something, it's like taking the foundation away from something so that it falls, but you weaken something. That's really what it means. You weaken public trust in science. And we need to feel like we can believe the scientists when they publish studies. But I have to say, Tom, I come to suspect a lot of science that we get these days because these scientists are being paid to do studies and research too. So I don't always believe everything I see.
You gotta watch a lot of talk shows and you gotta do a lot of research to find out who's telling the truth. Don't want to undermine public trust in nutrition science. And perhaps the best thing we can do is consume food in moderation, eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, and maintain an active lifestyle. Those are all things you can do. I always hear that. I keep hearing these studies about, they found out that sugar is bad for you. Okay, what's the conclusion? Eat more fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
They found out that carbohydrates and protein in excessive amounts is too bad for you. What should you do? Eat more fruits and vegetables.
That's right.
It seems like in the end, the only thing you can do, and exercise, have a healthy lifestyle or active lifestyle. And one thing I did want to mention, though, because we were talking about Coca-Cola earlier, I drink coffee, and I don't put sugar in my coffee. I don't like to have sweet coffee. I like it bitter, but I don't know if I've ever had cola without some kind of sweetener in it.
Oh, you don't drink Diet Coke or Coke Zero?
Diet Coke has artificial sweeteners in it. It's still sweet. I would like to try cola that has no sweetener in it whatsoever.
I think that would be bad, Tom.
It would probably be very bitter, but I like bitter coffee.
Well, that's like chocolate that doesn't have sugar, cocoa.
Raw chocolate. I understand that's actually
bitter.
Pretty good for you, actually.
Yeah, it is good for you. Not a lot. Everything in moderation. When you use this word moderation, it means you don't eat too much. You just eat a little bit. You avoid excess. You avoid going to extremes. Moderation is a good way to live.
Yeah, people talk about that if you drink alcoholic beverages. Well, moderation. Don't overdo it. Don't get yourself totally drunk. Just have a drink or two with your friends at dinner and stuff like that.
Yeah, you find when kids, especially when they start going to university and they're not used to having freedom, you tend to do crazy things. What I did when I was a freshman is I overate. Ooh. I was really thin growing up, and then I was a freshman in college, and I was living away from home, and my roommate and I, we would order food every day and just eat and eat. We had so much fun. So you just need to think about eating, a nice portion, not too much food, and then getting out there and walking, running, whatever you need to make you happy. Tend to walk. Tom likes to ride his bike, right?
Sometimes, yeah, if the weather's good. I've been doing a lot of indoor exercise, lifting weights and working on the exercise trampoline and stuff like that. And that's an example of an active lifestyle. I see here people in Taiwan, though, are sometimes just too busy to exercise. I've got to get to school. I've got to get my kids to school. I got to get to work. So basically, people don't really walk all that much or don't exercise all that much.
You know, it's funny. I think that people in America exercise more than the people in Taiwan, but they're still fat. The thing is, calories matter. So you can exercise all you want, but if you don't cut down or cut back on the calories, you're still going to, weigh too much. That's a problem.
Diet is the big issue there. So
it's
again,
80-20, right? 80% is what you eat and 20% is how much you exercise.
And eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, which we have a lot of here in Taiwan. Why waste your time consuming all those carbohydrates and sugared foods and stuff like that? So yes, indeed, as it says here at the end of the article, eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, maintain an active lifestyle, and all of these, or all of which, should lead to both a happy and healthy life. And yes, indeed, imagine a day when you're nice and thin and fit and trim, and you don't need to worry about how many Coca-Colas you're drinking every day. And that brings us to the end of our explanation. It's time now for our Chinese teacher to take over for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to say goodbye.
这样的实验研究到底有没有真的可信呢？其实呢，可能不尽然它是正确的，而这也就是最大的问题。好，这边用到的 Therein lies the biggest problem。注意到，这也是一个倒装句哦。这个倒装句里面 therein 这个副词放在前面，然后呢，后面呢，真正的主词是The biggest problem， 也就是最大的问题就在这里。好，那下面就说到这些他们所谓像可口可乐啦，像这些制糖的协会啦，他们呢去资助研究，并不是为了要呈现错误的事实，而是为了掩盖真相。那尽管说并不是这样一定都如此，可是我们一般大众就对营养学这些它的信任度也就降低了。不过它后面就告诉我们，其实我们该怎么做呢？我们要做的应该就是如果说你能够适量的摄取食物，好，这是第一点，它其实有连续3个重点，看到了吗？要我们 the best thing we can do is， 好，第一点 consume 这个动词，适量摄取食物，后面第2点多吃新鲜的蔬菜水果，还有后面的第3点 maintain an active lifestyle。 好，讲到了这3点，然后后面有一个逗点后面 all of which， 我们知道我们呢用这种不定代名词，像 all， 像 both， 像 several， 像 two， 后面呢会有这种句构 all of which 加关代，然后它当然用逗点隔开，这是非限定用法，指的也就是前面这3个全部。 OK， 好，这个句型要特别注意，我们下次见。
That's all the time we have for today, everybody. We hope you can have a nice and healthy lifestyle and be happy for many years to come. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.